When I'm scrolling through the internet and I hear a song from Everywhere at the End of Time, it makes me feel lost, broken, and scared, but grateful and hopeful. And that isn't because the song itself evokes those feelings, some of them do, but most of it comes from the impact that the album has had on me. EATEOT, idiot, is an album made by an artist known as The Caretaker, one Leland James Kirby, who is known for his experimental and exploratory music, which often has motifs and themes of memory, deterioration, nostalgia, and loss in one form or another. Everywhere at the End of Time is the culmination of a lot of what his work is built up to, and I would say that this album is The Caretaker's magnum opus. Though listening to the album EATEOT on its own is just a weird album, an unsettling and sometimes unbearable, but mostly just weird album. It's only when you start to realize what it represents that it goes from weird music to something far, far darker and far, far more real. Something absolutely terrifying yet beautiful. Everywhere at the End of Time is a series of 6 stages and 50 songs exploring dementia and the fragility of memory. It's an exploration of a slow deterioration and the totality of a terrifying illness, and this is done through what is a very simple idea that in practice becomes one of the most immersive methods of storytelling that I've ever experienced. And that is that the songs represent memories. Each song is a memory, or at least each song is a piece of memory. The way it's arranged is how the memory played out, and the instruments are the elements that make up that memory. As the album moves forward, the dementia creeps onward, and the memories begin to fade and distort, each set of memories organized in stages. I don't think there's any way to describe this album and do it justice, so if you haven't, I highly recommend that you listen to it and try to understand it as best you can, ideally without any distractions, as it is best if you treat it like an experience, one that you focus on and really feel and understand. Nevertheless, I want to explore what makes this exploration so real, and why, in my opinion, it's one of the greatest pieces of art ever created. So I'm going to break it down and go through it stage by stage and song by song, telling you my personal interpretations of each song as well as my thoughts on the stage as a whole. At the beginning of each stage, I will read the exact words used in the description of each stage by the caretaker himself. Beyond those words, everything I say is my own interpretation, and it isn't official at all. Nonetheless, hello there, I am Muffin, and I'm going to take you through the experience of Everywhere at the End of Time, according to my brain. And seizure warning for some of the later stages because I will be using some of the video from the music videos that go with the album. So watch out for that if you are sensitive to flashing lights. Stage 1. Here we experience the first signs of memory loss. This stage is most like a beautiful daydream, the glory of old age and recollection, the last of the great days. A1. It's just a burning memory. The first song, and a very good one at that. This one, along with most of the songs, are made using sampled ballroom music from the olden times. This doesn't seem that crazy, and it isn't, but this song perfectly sets up the motifs of static, distance through reverb, and repetition that will later be very, very important and help define how this album tells its story. The title doesn't mean a lot past its literal meaning. Considering the album is literally about memory, you can't get much more on the nose than naming a song, It's Just a Burning Memory. Though it's a good thing to note that the title is a direct quote of the lyrics from the song that is sampled in this one. Either way, it works and helps set the stage. Overall, a very memorable and well put together first song in memory. A2. We don't have many days. With a much more subdued instrumentation, only piano, this is probably a much more calm and maybe somber memory, possibly a quiet moment with a loved one. The repetition is still there, but that's more just how the song is written and doesn't have any real meaning yet. The static that's so indicative of the time period when the music is from, as well as the bit of distance, show the inherent subtle non-clarity present in memory. We don't remember things perfectly down to every little detail, but that's normal, not really anything to be alarmed about. Or at least that's how it seems. The title, while seeming related to the album's meaning, I think is more indicative of this memory. Maybe this was a conversation about mortality, maybe they were talking about how temporary life is. We don't really know with nothing but the music to go off of. A3. Late Afternoon Drifting. Another solo piano piece, though a more cheerful and upbeat one. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a happy memory, maybe them playing out in the woods, The title saying when it happened, a late afternoon of enjoyment. It isn't super elegant and proper because it isn't meant to be. It's fun. After a moment of listening, you will probably have tuned out the static without realizing. If not by this song, then probably soon enough. The repetition is still present. Not alarming though, more just a charming little quirk. This is a good memory, and it's nice to think about it. A4. Childishly Fresh Eyes. Moving away from the piano, we are back to a full orchestral piece, though the distance seems greater, a bit more noticeable reverb that you'll hear instantly with headphones. The song is a bit longer, probably a bigger moment, maybe at a party or with family, and it stretches on with much less repetition. A coherent and methodical timeline is clearly audible. It's an upbeat, though dynamic and flowing piece. The horns occasionally cut in by a piano chord. A bit of familiarity goes a long way. Though the song ultimately ends not too long and a bit abruptly. Nothing else really of note here. The title could imply that this is a childhood memory, but I think rather it's saying that this is a memory of innocence, looked at through childishly fresh eyes. A5, Slightly Bewildered. Back to piano, but a much more muffled sound, a subdued melody, like the distance has grown. Maybe this memory is a bit of a foggier one, less important but still memorable and noticeable. The details aren't exact because it's about the feeling rather than the specifics. It's short and sweet, a fleeting moment of calm or maybe relief, with a repeating motif that remains present but is still not addressed. The title doesn't provide much more information than can be gathered by the song, other than maybe what emotion was felt. It isn't too important either way. It's possible that the cloudiness of the memory is bewildering, but this is just speculation. The problem still hasn't been realized. A6. Things That Are Beautiful and Transient. Another very calm piece, full band again, this time more subdued. Not a playful romp or a party, maybe another afternoon or evening, this time spent with more people, maybe a group of friends or family. As the title suggests, it is a beautiful and transient moment, calming and safe. It also lasts long, and while there is repetition, it is a smooth flow from start to finish. The cloudiness and static does grow slowly, more noticeable here if you are paying attention, but it's still nothing to be alarmed about, so it's pointless to dwell on it long. This is a good thing to think about. It's a safe place to be, nothing is wrong with it. Nothing at all. This is the last of Substage A, our first sign of progress. It's hard to think that there will be anything other than this peaceful remembrance as we move on. B1. All That Follows Is True. Inquisitive, it's a calm but bright full band piece, with plenty of charming quality to it, though the static seems to be slightly more pronounced here, and the looping quality of the music is still present, maybe a bit more noticeable, but not too intrusive. The title of the song doesn't hold a lot of meaning to me. Maybe it's something that was said back then, maybe this was a conversation or something, a confession or a storytelling. It isn't too clear. At the end of the song, it fades away with echoing final notes, not quite as put together or organized of an end as previous memories. If anything, it feels messy, like the details are inconsistent near the end, but there isn't much more to say here. B2, An Autumnal Equinox. A much calmer and quieter piece, though it's hard to tell if it's quieter or if it's just foggier, like the static blanketing the music has gotten a bit thicker. The autumnal equinox, for those who don't know, is the day of the year when day and night are of the same length. This could literally have taken place on the autumnal equinox, or it might be symbolic of something, such as that this occurred halfway through something, halfway through life, halfway through childhood, maybe halfway through a certain challenge or a segment of school. It isn't clear, but it is clearly a moment of calm and respite, maybe to take a break from challenges and hardships in life at the time. It's not really specific, but the feeling is there, the repetition is there, and yet again the pieces slowly echo away at the end, fading to quiet through those echoes. It could mean less coherent specifics near the end, but it isn't that important. Maybe it's just a stylistic choice. B3. Quiet Internal Rebellions. The static is less of a fog here, more distinct crackles and less of a blanket of sound, as the song slowly introduces itself and picks up, flowing horn melodies and the like, with cheerful piano fills between and on an upbeat but reserved feeling. It's a longer piece, yet still has that repetition. It's very faint, but listening closely, the echo is present throughout the song. Instruments play their melody multiple times again in the background, the sound looping until the next melody interrupts, moving the song forward. This results in an overall feeling of instability in the piece. It's subtle enough that you might not notice, but it conveys that feeling nonetheless. The end has a clear-cut ending, which allows the echo to be heard distinctly. Once the song is over, the last few notes of the piano continue to repeat, quieter and quieter until they're silent. The title could mean many things. I'm not sure if it's indicative of the memory itself, or if it's more so the subtle conflicts of trying to fill in slightly incomplete detail, causing echoes and repeating moments. B4. The Loves of My Entire Life. The fog has grown more as the piano starts its solo playing. It's a faded and cloudy sound, increasing the feeling of distance from the source, but it's still a clear and defined melody, recognizable and noticeable. The repetition continues, the song being a longer one that moves on with its continuous pattern, though it doesn't get old like you would expect, rather being a pleasant place to be, a memory of happiness or loved ones, as the name The Loves of My Entire Life implies. It's clearly a very cherished memory, one very important and enjoyable. The end of the song is a sudden fade, though the echoes continue on for a couple seconds after the end again. They aren't as noticeable for the rest of the song because of the distance and muffling blanket of static, but they are still present through the song. B5. Into Each Other's Eyes. The band is back again, a bit farther away than last time, but still as bright and cheerful as before, with a subdued but upbeat song, full of little flourishes and charming character. Probably another memory with a loved one, maybe dancing with each other or laughing together. The title fits with this idea. Maybe this was a moment where they looked into each other's eyes, breaking away from the distractions around them, and just enjoying each other's company. Regardless of the context, it's that moment with them that's the core of this memory, and what makes it such a calming and fun experience. The ending once again echoes for a moment, leaving behind a couple of bits of that feeling before moving on. The song is relatively long, and it's likely that we're dwelling on and thinking about that moment for a while. But of course there is an end, so we decide to move on. B6. My Heart Will Stop in Joy. A strong start, much less subdued than most of the other songs so far, with full and bright horns, strings, and other instruments filling up the area and even overpowering the static, though without a doubt it still has that distance in front of it. The echoes are there but are pretty much unnoticeable without looking for them, since the song continues onwards, though, without giving a chance for any echoes to be heard clearly. This is probably a very important and happy memory, one full of joy and life, which the title ties into perfectly. Maybe an event, a proposal, a celebration, or something similar. My first thought was a wedding, but it could really be anything. Either way, it's a memory filled to the brim with that joy, though it isn't super long, instead being a bit shorter, though the emotion it shows in that short time makes up for it. The end is once again an echoing fade into nothing, then concluding with a few seconds of silence. And with that, stage 1 is concluded. Cover art. Beaten frowns after. The cover art of this stage is very recognizable. A stack of papers or fabrics rolled and made to stand. There's a visible crease in the pages, but other than that, there isn't much wrong with them. That crease is important though, as well as the little bits of weathering shown on the pages, as it shows this recognizable and familiar object, but it isn't entirely perfect. It has wrinkles and bits of wear. It isn't perfectly clear, perhaps representative of the wear and almost smudging static present in the music in this stage. It's still those memories, but they're a bit faded and unkempt. Not enough that you can't still read the paper, though. Stage as a whole. Stage 1 is not too different from normal people's perception of memories. It's a little bit off, maybe unclear, but not enough to let us realize that something is wrong. Moving through, the static and distance grow slowly and steadily. Memories are still vivid, but some details have been lost over time. And with the introduction of the echoes when moving from A to B, we see the first signs of not just a lack of clarity, but more of an instability and warping within the memories. Though again, it's not enough for us to realize that anything is wrong. As the description of the stage says, this stage is most like a beautiful daydream. The signs of memory loss are starting to appear, but we can't tell yet, and we don't know that the memories could disappear, so we aren't worried about it. This is an incredibly strong start to the album. It's subtle yet to the point and understandable. It perfectly sets up themes that will remain important throughout the rest of the album. Now that stage 1 is concluded, we move on to stage 2. Stage 2. The second stage is the self-realization and awareness that something is wrong with a refusal to accept that. More effort is made to remember so memories can be more long-form with a little more deterioration in quality. The overall personal mood is generally lower than the first stage and at a point before confusion starts setting in. C1. A losing battle is raging. Fog and wind formed of static blow over and coat this memory, thickly muffling the sound that used to be clear and dominant. The static has grown, too much to ignore anymore at this point, yet it's ignored anyway. As the song plays, it's a calm one, with a bit of a strange flow that feels almost disorganized compared to tracks from before, yet still relatively cohesive, just not quite as stable. This continues on for a while before the static starts to build, growing slowly louder until it's taken to focus, at which point the song ends, and the static slowly fades off afterwards. The title of the song is likely commenting directly on the state of the mind right now. It's fighting on, but ultimately this is a losing battle. They'll fight on regardless, whether that's out of perseverance, fear, or something else isn't clear. But they do keep fighting. C2. Misplaced in Time. This song picks up with piano, but quickly a melody of horns kicks in. A solemn and almost off-putting melody, still masked in crackling static, though it's calmed down a bit. The music paired with the static and reverb here gives more of a sense of being lost, possibly representing that the memory itself is lost, misplaced, as the title would suggest. The memory is distinguishable and clear enough to recognize, but they can't quite remember when it happened. It's been misplaced. With a continuous subtle repetition and reverb, it still feels far. It's a distant memory, it just isn't clear how distant. And it doesn't get any easier to tell as the song continues, rather it just gets a little bit more unclear, which is accented by that rather than coming to an ending, the song just ends at the end of a musical phrase, then echoes and drifts off into silence. C3. What does it matter how my heart breaks? This song is the first song. It's just a burning memory. Again, it isn't immediate, but after listening for a moment it becomes obviously familiar. But this time it's different. Echoes and thicker static plague the music, and though the melody is still present, it's distorted, giving the sense that the memory has faded and information from it has been warped. Echoes drone out in the background and crackling static covers the familiar music. This is the first moment where it has become obvious how much degradation has really happened. Until this point, it could have seemed like nothing has changed and this is all just old ballroom music. But now, through this track, the album tells us explicitly that the memories are getting worse, and we are degrading in quality and clarity. Whether we choose to accept it or not, it's a wake-up call. But our denial is too thick to hear it, and we can't accept the reality of the situation. The title could be a direct tonal parallel to this. What does it matter how my heart breaks? Could also be a message of what does it matter that this memory has changed? It doesn't mean anything, nothing has gone wrong. But the title could mean something else. It is one of the lyrics from the song originally sampled for the album. At the end of the track, the song just stops after a note, then echoing away and leaving us for a couple seconds with nothing but contemplation over the hollow realization made during the song. C4. Glimpses of hope in these trying times. The song starts off silent, then we hear sole notes played, then gradual joining of other instruments, all of them echoing and distant with a consistent crackle still present. The reverb is much more notable here, with notes played echoing for long after they're played, continuing onwards through the song until we reach about halfway through when the main melody kicks in. But it is still just as far away and still solemn. There's a bit of hope and optimism in the melody itself. It holds the hopes of overcoming the issue that they're still holding on to. But after a brief climax, this glimmer fades back out, returning to the distant and droning strings that convey nothing but a palpable hopelessness, all of which is mirrored by the title of the song. The realization was already made, but there are glimpses of hope, and those are what we pay attention to and hold on to for the rest of this stage, ignoring all of the other information in hopes of that fantasy. With a simple chord that fades to silence, the song comes to a quiet end, mostly having served as a quiet but still noisy and real interlude to collect our thoughts after the last song. C5, Surrendering to Despair. We are back to the style of music most common here, a band playing a symphony of parts, but this time it's harder to hear clearly. The static has grown, the wind picked up again, swishing past the warped sounds of the instruments, crackles and grime covering a quiet but emotional memory. The hope, the glimmer from the last song isn't recognizable here, and as the song continues, the static only grows more, taking over the focus and making it harder to focus on the music. At one point, the music even going silent for a little bit, nothing but static, before it starts to pick up slowly again. But each moment that passes makes it harder to ignore the static that at first was almost unnoticeable. This is a point where even though we hold on to hope, we can't help but, as the title says, surrender to despair. And as the song slowly fades out, we reach the end of Substage C. The realization was made and the subsequent denial is in place, but it will be tested and can't stay stable forever. D1. I still feel as though I am me. There is no sound at first, or to be more specific, there is nothing but sound. Loud static and low droning noises until the first recognizable instruments start to be audible, and then a bright string melody kicks in, loud and isolated aside from quiet echoes of accompanying horns. Everything echoes for long after it was played. The reverb and distance have increased a lot, but all of the focus is on that music. It's more distant, but is still audible and recognizable. It's still clearly music, and the music itself reflects that idea. It gives the sense of persistence in the idea that it still is self, which is also reflected by the title. I still feel as though I am me. We still feel as though the memories are recognizable, they're still the same memories, and we are still the same person. Even if things have changed, it doesn't matter, or at least that's what we believe and have convinced ourselves of. With a distant horn sounding the fade to silence, the song ends. D2. Quiet dusk coming early. The static has grown clearly, but this song is closer, or at least louder, with slight echo but nowhere near as much as the previous song. It's a piece filled with soft contentment, juxtaposed against the state of the music. The memory is a happy and maybe even peaceful one, but it's so hard to remember clearly at this point that it loses that peace. The feeling of this song would have given before is drowning in the growing static and subtle distortion. The title could be related to what the memory is about, or it could be related to the current mental state. Dusk is typically referred to as the time between sunset and night. The nightfall and darkness that come with it are coming early. The decline of memory and recall are coming early. The sunset has already come to an end, and the darkness grows in the approach of night. As the song ends, the static fills our ears for a moment before the next song begins. D3. Last moments of pure recall. A more upbeat song, with full horns and a melody of whimsy. The static is less noticeable here. We aren't straining as much to remember clearly, but are instead just enjoying the emotion conveyed. The details aren't important as long as the emotion and substance is there, or at least that's what we've convinced ourselves of. And though this is working for now, it's still denial of the idea that it will get worse than this, denial of the thought that the memory is fading or changing more. The title fits this. These are the last moments of pure recall, a time when we can purely and meaningfully recall these memories and bask in the emotion of them. But of course it's temporary, and the solution won't last forever. The song echoes into the distance and into silence more suddenly than expected after a note, like the memory ended without a completely clear and precise ending. D4. Denial Unraveling. This song has brought back the distance of before, with instruments echoing far in the distance, with a harmony that gives us the emotion of contentment, but a sense of looming, unnerving change. As the static crackles above the music itself, the distance only feels to be growing larger, which It makes the feeling of the song twist to be as if it has changed already, and the emotion is already lost in the distance, replaced by discomfort and a struggle to return to how it was. But ultimately, as the title says, the denial is unraveling, and the truth is going to be forced and accepted soon. And as the song comes to a close and fades away, the denial falls away, leaving nothing to protect us from what was hidden beneath. D5. The way ahead feels lonely. The distance remains the same here, but rather than feeling sinister, it is merely a fact. As the slow and emotional music begins to kick in, giving a sense of contemplation, we can't deny the truth anymore, and have come to accept reality, as scary as it is. And this song and memory is how we confront that truth, in its acknowledgement that things will continue, and we can't hide from the future. Hence the title, The Way Ahead Feels Lonely. But we won't try to pretend that we don't need to take that path, since we don't have a choice and can't escape any longer. A quiet and soft end that fades away in the distance brings a close to stage 2. Cover art, Peter Pickgown in a Katheinstørsper. The art of this stage is recognizable as a flower pot with 4 pink flowers sprouting from it, but the pot itself is confusing to look at, with an abstract and almost random shape. You can tell it's a flower pot, but it doesn't really look like one, almost like the state of the memories in this stage, which have reached a point where they are still clearly memories, and what they're about can still be recognized, but the shape and the form is messy and hard to understand, with details falling apart and melding together. It still works to hold flowers or the meaning of the memories, but everything else that made it a pot has gone, and the flowers themselves could hold meaning too. They've grown in seemingly random directions, even though flowers usually grow towards whatever natural light source is closest, giving the idea that they, like how some of the songs implied, are lost and roaming aimlessly. The appearance and direction of the flowers also portrays that they are drooping, and possibly their stems are even starting to wilt and wither. Yet despite that, they are still blooming and attempting to continue living, in denial of the fact that they're going to wilt as well, like how we are in denial of the fact that we will continue to degrade and wilt as well. Stage as a whole. This stage is the realization of the issue is made, but we can't accept the thought that we are deteriorating, so we try, and eventually fail, to ignore and deny reality. Straining to remember more clearly and at every turn trying to hold on to a hope that it won't get worse, yet in spite of all of our attempts, the deterioration and degradation continue. Memories getting foggier and more distant as time goes on, moving from C to D after the denial is built up, reality's continuously testing it until finally our denial unravels, and we're finally left with nothing but a knowledge of the fact that our memory has gotten and is getting worse, with no way for us to stop it now. And eventually, our memories will be unrecognizable, or we won't be able to remember anything at all. The stage ends with the contemplation and acknowledgement of that fact. Okay, here's a quick aside. From this point onward, for each song, I will be joined by Benji. Say hi, Benji. Hi, Benji. No, that's not... Okay, whatever. Benji is going to be doing an exercise in immersion and empathy, and will be giving thoughts and reactions on each song from the perspective of the person who the album is in the perspective of. It makes sense, trust me. This will give a more personal analysis to go along with my more literal and out-of-body analysis. So good luck, Benji. Thanks in advance for your help. Anyway, on with the next stage. Stage 3. Here we are presented with some of the last coherent memories before confusion fully rolls in and the grey mists form and fade away. Finest moments have been remembered, the musical flow in places is more confused and tangled. As we progress, some of singular memories become more disturbed, isolated, broken, and distant. These are the last embers of awareness before we enter the post-awareness stages. E1. Back There, Benjamin. This song doesn't seem too bad at first, but soon it becomes clear that the tones have been distorted and warped. But once the melody kicks in, something else becomes obvious. The track is playing multiple times on top of itself, slightly delayed, the echo from before transforming to multiple overlapping repeated melodies, giving a sense of chaos and disorganization that was only hinted at before now. Of course, the constant repetition of the long, droning track only becomes more obvious, like the memory is playing on a continuous warped loop, details overlapping and becoming harder to distinguish from each other. This continues onwards until suddenly it cuts out, replaced by an immediate silence. No fadeaway or ending, just an abrupt stop in the middle of the song, giving the sense that the memory either just abruptly stopped or they stopped trying to remember it. The title of the song could mean something, but it seems more like words just for the sake of making a title, maybe meaning that this memory is tangled up enough that they don't even know what about it is the point or the main purpose. What was it? Did it? Oh right, I remember. It's a bit confusing, though. When did that... No, that was before, right? What's happening? So many things, but I can't tell how or why. What am I trying to remember? This isn't right. It shouldn't. I don't think it is. I'm not sure. I can't... I remember it, but what was happening right then? E2 and Heart Breaks. This song is another step in deterioration, with a revisit to the first song, but this time farther off and more distorted, almost completely muffled by a veil of noise and far away, much further away than before. It's still recognizable as the first song, but it's so much harder to make out anything besides the melody, with continued echoes and static constantly muddying the sounds. The title is no longer lyrics of the song sampled, but rather has taken words from the lyrics and scrambled them up, leaving what definitely resembles but isn't the same as the title of the previous song, What Does It Matter How My Heart Breaks? Beyond that, I don't think it has much meaning. The ending is a fade away, unlike the previous song. Why? I was able to remember this better before. I know I was. Why is it so much harder? Why does it feel so far away? None of the details are obvious anymore. I still remember, but I can't remember all of it. Why is it so much harder? I shouldn't have to try so hard just to remember this. E3, Hidden Sea Buried Deep. This song is a much shorter one, and starts with crackles and pops of static and noise. Then as a melody kicks in, it begins to start to feel normal, but then after a few moments of playing, the piano slows down, then falling silent, replaced again by the pops and crackling static. Then, once again, as if it didn't happen already, the same melody begins again, playing through identically up to the same point, and slowing down again. Then again it repeats, continuing to fail to get past that part of the song, giving the idea that they can remember part of it, but after a certain point the memory becomes inaccessible, like they can't remember anything else from it, yet it keeps repeating as they keep trying to remember over and over again, until eventually it just stops and falls silent, replaced again by noise before the song ends. The title seems to be mostly nonsense, words strewn together that are mostly confusing beyond forming a real sentence, though the words buried deep could relate to the fact that the memory is buried deep within and they can't seem to get it out no matter how hard they try. I remember this, cause then it, I'll just start over. So then, and then, after, what happened after that? I should know this, why can't I remember? I'll just try again. Why? Why can't I remember what happened next? I should be able to remember this, it's on the tip of my tongue. Why can't I remember? E4, Labette's All Joyful Camaraderie. This song is the same song from E1, Back There Benjamin, but this time distorted differently, with less chaotic sound but more distance and loss of clarity. Thoughts aren't as jumbled together at the moment, but they are foggier nonetheless, with clarity seeming to continually drop as time goes on. The memory is there and is decipherable, but details have faded into nothing but background noise. The song fades away in a slow and lasting echo into silence. The title could be a hint as to the meaning of the memory that was lost in E1 before, a memory of friendship perhaps, but it's hard to attribute it to anything specific. The word Labette either being a name or just an unrelated word that was jumbled in on accident. Wait, I remember now. That was a good day. Though, what did we have? I thought it was... No, wait, it's a small detail, but it felt important. I wouldn't forget that. What was it? Did it matter? I'm not sure anymore, but I still can't tell what it was.
I still can't tell what a lot of it was, just the feeling. But none of what caused the feeling. Ugh, so confusing.
E5, to the minimal great hidden. This song is one of the first that is almost unrecognizable as music, with instruments in the distance that cut out and are covered in constant static, making the melody sound more implied than anything concrete. Though it does sound familiar, maybe a repeat of a previous song, but it's too non-distinct to really tell. The title here just seems like more words, but the word hidden seems like it was taken from E3, maybe some overlap in the identification of the two memories, though the rest of it seems to be new.
What is this? When did it happen? No, what happened? I can't remember. Did this happen? What happened? Did anything happen? I can't remember it. Am I even remembering anything?
E6, Sublime Beyond Loss. The music comes back for this song through a surprisingly clean start that quickly deforms as sounds cut short and skip around, sometimes repeating and sometimes not even playing for more than a split second, with fades away and back as they combine into a cluster of sound. It still conveys a feeling, a theme, but it's jumbled into the precipice of being meaningless, with no coherent line to tie it together. The title is a mix of words that don't convey much besides an idea of perseverance or determination. The thought of staying sublime, supreme, perfect, despite loss. But even this might be a shot in the dark, and it's possible there is no real meaning behind the words. Again, the song fades away for a moment before suddenly cutting out to silence.
Wait, I remember that, I think. But I don't know. What happened exactly? Do I remember this? I think so. Why is it so hard to think straight? This shouldn't be so difficult. If I just try harder, I can remember it well. If I just try a bit harder, I can do it. I swear I can. My head.
E7, Bewildered in Other Eyes. This track feels wrong. Not in the case of falling apart, but it feels unreasonably clean and organized besides small disturbances. There's an obvious melody present throughout the song, but it portrays a feeling of something being wrong about it. Like, rather than the music being warped, the track has changed entirely and taken on a new and falsified melody that doesn't fit properly with what used to surround it, which ties into the title's use of the word bewildered, which is a fitting way to describe the emotion that is evoked. It can also be noted that again, this title is reusing words from previous tracks. The word bewildered being taken from A5, it's a jumble of words taken from somewhere else in order to form this one, like the song is a jumble of pieces of music pushed together to make a new melody. The song fades away slowly, with echoing notes that drill into the brain as they leave.
Yes, I know. What do I know? I remember it. I remember this. When did this happen? I don't remember this, but I do. What's going on? It's clear as day, but when? How? It can't have happened. It doesn't make any sense. What am I remembering? This isn't right. It can't be right. It feels wrong, but I remember it, so it must be true. Right?
E8, Long-Term Dusk Glimpses. This song is one that feels instantly familiar. Staticky noise covering a rising sound that echoes from the distance, but seems unmistakable for something, though it's hard to tell what. As it plays, the feeling only grows, a confusion as to what song it is that you have recognized. Then, halfway through, the song cuts out suddenly, only to begin again from the beginning, as if nothing ever happened. Brass horns ringing away against the nonsensical static and distance that coat the piece. Suddenly again, the song cuts out to silence, though this time it does not come back, or restart, and ends almost as soon as it began. The title is again formed from words taken from previous songs, with dusk and glimpses both coming from stage 2, forming a nonsensical mix of words with no apparent meaning that just make the song harder to make sense of. After a while, the song cuts out, and we reach the end of the E tracks, part 1 of stage 3.
Yes, back when... Wait, when am I thinking of? I remember this. When did that happen? I remember it so well, don't I? It's clear as day. I remember all of it, but it's like I don't really. It's like I'm remembering the thought of a memory. I can't remember the truth. If I can peel back the layers and try harder, I can do it. I know I can.
F1. Gradations of arm's length. The static has grown more prominent in this track, barraging the ears with a crackling noise that makes it hard to pay any real attention to the song itself, which warps and changes constantly, never staying in a consistent volume or pitch for long. The mixing of static and continual distortion only makes the melody harder to understand or follow, but it's still noticeable and tangible. The title this time does not have any reused words from before, and still has a lack of any real meaning to it, though some idea of connection between length and gradations can be made. It's just grasping at straws, and it's likely that the title has no real connection or meaning. The song does not fade away, and merely stops suddenly at its end, immediately moving on to the next song with a whiplash that's almost become expected at this point.
I think I remember that. I think I remember it. If I can think harder, then I can really remember it. Just a bit more. It's so close. It's right there. Come on, I remember this. What was I thinking about?
F2. Drifting Time Misplaced. This song, a piano piece, is one of the most distant ones so far, with less pronounced static yet a muffling, depth-like quality. Like it's being played underwater. Over time, static grows and varies, and the tune gets harder to make out, but is still echoing, faintly, on over time. Though at a certain point, the echoes of it are all that are audible, with a crackling, echoey noise that is hard to distinguish, though eventually the song starts to raise up closer to the surface again, only to dip away, replaced with long and droning notes and sounds, nothing but an echo miles and miles away. At a certain point, it's hard to even hear any notes anymore. Then, when it feels like it's coming back, it disappears. No noise left except for static. The title is again a mix of previously used words, repetitiously shoving into new combinations that seem to be gibberish at best, containing nothing really of note or meaning.
What was that? Do I remember that? I think I do, but I can't think of it. It's really distant. Wait, what was I remembering? Oh yes, that. That was... What was it again? It was... Oh right, I know this. What happened? What was I saying? It probably doesn't matter.
F3. Internal Bewildered World. This track begins with nothing but static and noises at first, but then, after a moment, something resembling instruments or notes starts to fade in. But they drone on in an uncanny and incoherent way, like the memory or song is stretched out to an uncomfortable degree, replacing what would be meaningful notes into long and confusing sounds that don't feel like music, instead feeling more like changes in the static that is present. This continues on with no apparent melody or harmony appearing, just long lost echoes of what could have been instruments or something of value or purpose. Whatever this song used to be is almost entirely unknowable and unrecognizable. The song fades off into static again, leaving nothing behind. The title of this song is a mix of old words, old titles, a jumble of meanings and ideas that don't fit one another.
What am I thinking of? It's something. What is it? Am I remembering this? It can't be a memory. It doesn't even seem like one. It's just nothing. But it's definitely something. It feels like something. What is it? What is this in my head? Ugh.
F4. Burning despair does ache. This song, even despite what has happened, is immediately familiar. It's the first song again, A1, but it's even more distorted than it was in C3, giving us a new benchmark for how far gone the mind is. The level of distortion and corruption that has taken place, notes drone on long after they've ended, or cut out before they should, almost never managing to stay on their pitch. The music jumps around, flowing seemingly randomly throughout, warped and distorted noise penetrating a thick layer of static and echoing over and over again in the mind. The memory has gotten worse, considerably worse, to the point that it's almost unrecognizable, a far cry from how it was at the beginning of the album. It's clear evidence that the music and memories are still degrading and falling apart. We'd already accepted that they were fading, but this forces us to realize how quickly it's happening, and how little time there is before they stop being recognizable in the slightest, and we can't remember properly at all.
There isn't much time left, and nothing can change that. The title again uses words from before, but this time does take a word from the first song, further proof that it is the same memory. But like how the title stops being the same after the first word, the memory is also no longer the same. No. It can't have gotten this bad. I can't be forgetting this already. I need to remember it. I have to keep it from fading. If I try harder, then maybe I can hold on. Just hold on to it a little bit longer. I'm not ready to forget. I'm not ready to let go. I don't want to let go. Please, just let me remember.
F5, Aching Cavern Without Lucidity. This song is likely proof to us that the previous track was the truth. It showed us that we were forgetting, and this track proves it. Almost no sound except for distant and almost unnoticeable long and booming noises, an echoing void with nothing present in it anymore. This memory has been completely forgotten. It wasn't important enough to stay any longer, and it's gone, replaced with nothing but a cavernous emptiness. This could be what the title means, an aching cavern without lucidity. The memory is no longer lucid, to the point of being almost gone. It's nothing but an aching cavern. Occasional static breaks up the sound, but it's much more subtle and sparse than before. Noise replaced with quiet, memory replaced with a void.
What are you talking about? I don't remember that. Are you sure that happened? I'm pretty sure you're making this up, or I wasn't there. That's me? What? No, that never happened. I would remember if it did. You're lying. That must be fake. It has to be fake. I wouldn't forget that.
F6, An Empty Bliss Beyond This World. The song is present this time, a melody noticeable, albeit barely, underneath miles of water or emptiness. It echoes faintly in the far distance, and while it's still noticeable and discernible, it's difficult to make sense of something so far away. The song is an upbeat one, but through the profound emptiness is reduced to a feeling more than a song. An empty bliss, which could be what the title represents, though the beyond this world part is nothing but reused words pieced together to add on without any actual point or meaning. At the end of the song, it cuts off in the middle of a note, echoing for just a moment before ending.
Oh, I think I remember that, sort of, I think. I remember what it felt like, but I can't really remember anything else. I forgot a little bit, I guess. I should be able to remember this better, though. I should know the details. Let me just think for a bit. I can figure it out. If I just think about it, I can remember better.
F7, La Bête de Lait. This song is one that has played before. Specifically, it is the first song of Stage 3, Back There Benjamin, but it is degraded significantly, almost unrecognizable at first until you've listened for a bit longer. The clarity and even distortion have faded to the point that the tune is almost non-existent. It gives the idea that as a memory distorts and fades, eventually even its distortions and warping become invisible or distant as it gets farther and farther away. The memory is barely itself anymore. In fact, it barely exists anymore, beginning to morph into an empty cavern such as the one from before. The title is a mix of combined words from before, even some reused from this stage, reading as pure nonsensical chaotic combinations of what used to be titles.
I don't remember that. No, wait, I think I do. I sort of remember. When did that happen? What happened after that? I can't quite remember right. It's so foggy. If I could just push through, then I could see it perfectly. What were you asking?
F8, Mournful Camaraderie. As the last song of Stage 3, we come back again to the first song, though the distortion has taken a back seat to pure distance. Glitching and warped tones cry through a foggy nothingness as we try to remember. But it's only gotten harder to hear it clearly, with droning tones sometimes drowning the music entirely. Only for it to push through again, every effort must be made in order to remember, and it gets harder and harder to keep trying so hard. So eventually, it can't be held on to any longer, and as it ends, the song is drowned out and then taken over by ever-present sounds that ring from ear to ear, taking over the senses. The title, while using the word camaraderie from a previous song, conveys the entirety of its meaning in the only other word, mournful. This is the death of the ability to remember memories in full, and the death of the ability to distinguish between noise and meaningful music.
And it's a moment of mourning in that fact, mourning of the point of no return, which we stand at the precipice of. After this point, after the song is taken over by sound, there won't be any going back, and nothing will be the same. It's gotten so much harder. I have to hold on. I need to hold on. I'm not ready to let go yet. I'm not ready to forget. I just need to keep trying. Please don't leave. Please don't let go. Just hold on just a little longer. I want to stay here a little longer. I don't know what I'll do without you. I don't know what I'm going to do. I just want to remember. And with that, the final song of Stage 3 ends with the same song with which Stage 1 began, and we move on to Stage 4. Cover art, Hag. The cover art of this stage is a much more abstract painting than the previous two, but it still has a very clear point. It has the appearance of a plant of some kind, one that's overgrown and morphs into its own pot shape without a real one there. The branches or stems curl about on themselves and out into the air in uncontrollable swirls and strokes, tossing aside any of the reason or control present in the art of the previous two stages, and replacing it with a new sense of chaos and loss of control, reflecting the idea of memories losing structure and becoming increasingly warped and distorted uncontrollably. The idea of an increasing level of abstract imagery begins here, but it really begins in the next stage. Here it is mostly just establishing the idea of the art losing its meaning and cohesion, just as Stage 3 introduced the idea of memories losing meaning and cohesion. The branching paths of the plant could also be compared to the chaotic branching structures of neurons, though I'm not sure what the significance of this is past that it's representative of the brain and the mind. Stage as a whole. This stage is where the most serious degradation and deterioration take place so far. As memories begin falling apart and fading away, despite our best efforts to hold on to them, even the most important memories eventually become so fragile that there's nothing to hold on to. This is a slow change and takes place over time, and while we've already accepted that our memory is failing us, it doesn't occur to us how quickly it's getting worse, or how bad it's going to get. To the point that there's some things that we really do just forget and never remember again. The straining attempts made to remember only seem to make remembering harder, and it only seems to make the memories fade faster. Trying harder and harder to remember becomes impossible as memories slip away and out of focus, thoughts disappearing and changing with a fluidity that will define the later stages. This stage is the last that we will spend aware, and it is the last that we will spend truly remembering. As we move onwards, memories will cease to be memories, and structure and reason will fall apart entirely. This stage ends with a mourning of that loss and of that structure, and on a solemn and melancholic note, we have no choice but to move forward, since no amount of effort can stop the flow of time. Stage 4. Post-awareness stage 4 is where serenity and the ability to recall singular memory gives way to confusions and horror. It's the beginning of an eventual process where all memories begin to become more fluid through entanglements, repetition, and rupture. G1. Stage 4 Post-awareness confusions. This song begins with an obvious change from previous stages. Completely random sound and noise play and cut out. Instruments and in some cases melodies exist for only a moment before disappearing again, and staticky white noise constantly sounds in the ears, all combining in a tangled mess of sound that can't be followed in any real way. Occasionally, familiar melodies and notes will play. Sometimes even a song will seem to begin only to be cut short or fade off as if it never arrived in the first place. With the left and right ear playing consistently different sounds, never once being in sync with each other, meaning each ear is experiencing an entirely different chaos, all of which combines into the idea of memories and thoughts melding with meaningless noise in each other. Individual details or thoughts are mixed in an impossible to follow soup, creating a feeling of confusion and the same level of despair and fear. The noise of the song is louder and more intrusive. Occasionally a song from before will begin to play, and as soon as it seems like it's back to how it was before, it either disappears or warps to become unrecognizable. This happens with many familiar songs over time, yet eventually some of them are hard to recognize or remember the tune of.
One example of this is the first song, which makes a few appearances. It distorts and mixes with other senseless noise every time it's audible, making its sounds and melody that were familiar now confusing, and often songs will play on top of each other, or instruments and songs from them will intrude on others, all the while only adding to the disconnectedness of the two ears. Sometimes when songs play, it's hard to even know what song it is, or if it has been played before. The effect only gets more and more pronounced as time moves on, and no change seems to occur at all. Whether a sound or note is familiar becomes hard to distinguish, and eventually no effort is made to distinguish at all. Near the end of the song, the track changes, beginning to transfer sound from one side to the other, an unfamiliar and sporadic sound that continues taking over the senses, covering other melodies with staticky and messy sound, making other noise even harder to perceive through the blanket covering it. Eventually, this suddenly ends, and the confusing mess of familiar notes returns, though with what seems to be like more corruption than before, with songs even harder to make out or notice. G1 is titled Stage 4 Post-Awareness Confusions. It is self-explanatory.
I can't think. It's so much noise. There's so much noise. What is happening? I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand what's happening. I want it to stop. I want the noise to stop. It's so loud. What's going on? I'm so confused.
H1, Stage 4 Post-Awareness Confusions. This track is essentially a continuation of the previous one, a torrent of inconsistency pelting the ears at random intervals. It's a mix of small details and bits of memories melting apart and being melded together, losing structure and meaning, which is replaced by non-clarity, incomprehensible thoughts. Our own mind can't function right and mixes thoughts, feelings, and sensations all together, a whirling mixture of feeling that cultivates a raw form of confusion. Partway through the track, some distant booming low sounds begin echoing, giving the entire track a distance and emptiness to it. With surrounding thoughts and feelings being hard to understand or hold on to, bits of memory swirl in an endless cacophony, and it's hard to tell which ones are real and which ones were just made up. Whether a piece is memory or lies isn't clear, and it becomes increasingly harder to tell as our brain and mind warp and fall apart. Amalgamations of memory and feeling slosh through an empty cavern of life randomly and lose any direction or structure that was once there. Buildings fall to rubble and form a pile of broken parts that is impossible to navigate or put back together. This continues as the state of our mind deteriorates and we struggle to make any kind of change to the circumstances. Waves of static, burdened sounds pass across the perceptions, leaving behind a stillness in their wake that gives a moment of calm before another wave comes, where the drowning, mixing noise takes back control. We're drowning in the melted memories that surround us, with no way of knowing which way is up as we're pushed below the surface again and again. A good portion of the way through, a loud and all-encompassing noise takes over, completely filling the ears with crackling sound that drowns out the other noises. A mix of thousands of pieces of lost memories firing off in an impossible tone, the silence after being filled with static and blurry sound that further accentuates the feeling of drowning or falling as it covers and smothers the ears. Any consistency found is the consistency of chaos. Organized or secluded thoughts or memories have become an impossibility, an unthinkable thought in the state of our mind. Discomfort and fear have become something ever-present and unchanging, a constant burden on the thoughts that only bogs down the ability to understand even more. H1 is titled Stage 4 Post-Awareness Confusions.
What's going on? Why is it so loud? There's so much noise, I can't think straight. I can barely think at all. What is all of this? What is all this noise? I just want to remember. I don't want this noise. I just want to remember. What's wrong with me? Am I gonna be like this forever? I don't want to be like this anymore.
I1, Stage 4 Temporary Bliss State. This track shows immediate similarities to the previous two. Sounds that play at random and cut out or otherwise don't play normally, with separation between the two ears and static accompanying the noise, though this is contrasted with an entirely different arrangement of sounds used. Ethereal noises with a tranquil quality fill the air, replacing the amalgamations of sound that were present before. And while there's still the existence of an obvious chaos and non-clarity, the mood of the song is wildly different. It doesn't translate any sense of insanity and confusion, but rather invokes a state of calm. Memories have taken a different form, where before there was a raging torrent of thoughts and emotion and ideas drowning us in our own pieces, now there is a stillness where before there was music, melodies and ideas that crashed against one another now rest in a fluid and pile. Where before we were drowning under the waves of memory, now we float atop the surface of calm waters. This is because the horror has gone. The emotions of desperation and terror that stirred the pot have faded away and been replaced by calm. We've to some degree managed to accept this reality, accepted the confusion and chaos that horrified us. This track comes from that state of acceptance, and it conveys the feeling perfectly in how its sounds melt together and apart. The structure that was lost is lost forever, but we have come to realize that it isn't needed and can be lived without. In a way, we're letting go of our attempts to stop what's happening and let go of a need for structure or rigidity. Memories have become fluid, and we are able to endlessly and peacefully float on that fluid. The title of the track reflects this, temporary bliss state. We've reached a state of bliss in what was a situation of incomprehensible confusion and terror. We aren't trapped under the rubble of crumbled memories, we're buried and cradled in the warm embrace of the pieces of those memories. As the sounds ring on in layers of trance-like noise, it takes the form of what could be really considered music again. A different and less concrete or normal kind of music, but music nonetheless. Though one word can't be ignored in the title of the track, this state of bliss is temporary and will end sooner or later. What will cause it to is not yet known, and in fact we ourselves don't realize how temporary it is yet. We believe that we can float endlessly, but that will change soon enough and the flow of time will continue, regardless of our response to its perseverance. We are in a temporary bliss state, and in its peace we will forget that it has to end and that it will be our undoing. Maybe this isn't so bad. It's loud, I don't really understand, but it's alright. I'm alright being like this. If I survive like this, that would be enough for me. Things will be okay. I will be okay. I don't know what's going on, but I don't need to. I'll be fine here. I'm happy. J1, Stage 4 Post-Awareness Confusions. This track is a reversion. Songs that before again play in distorted and confusing ways, mixing with other sounds and disassembling over time, coinciding with another change in mood and a return to a more pure confusion, and a return of the horror that was present before. Constant noise and sound plague the ears as confusing backgrounds are thrown against one another, though this track is noticeably quieter and more sparse than the previous ones, with only a few sounds or distorted songs present at a time, and with a more noticeable static in the background as the track drones on. Some of the ethereal sounds here from the previous song are present again, mixed in with the warped melodies of disfigured songs and amalgamations of sound that haunt the ears. The fluid of entangled memories has taken on a roughness and dizzying, corrupted nature that it had before, waves of thought crashing against us and pulling us below again, though there are more moments of stillness and peace in the middle of the onslaught of chaos. The quality of our mental state has changed. There's a fear and a need to stop the flow that has made the fluid of memories uncalmable and relentless, pulling us below the surface with every chance that it gets. Individual memories of peace spring up occasionally, but again, fear and horror take hold. The reason why terror has returned is because of the same reason of the growing sparseness of sound and growing presence of static and unrecognizable noise. The corruption has not stopped. The memories are still falling apart and eventually ceasing to be. The fluid of melded and ruined memories is disappearing and drying up. The return of horror and a desire to stop time is because of a realization of the fact that the corruption is continuing. A realization that the state of bliss is temporary because the emotions and memories that make up that state are disappearing. The bliss state was not the end of the decline. It was merely a way of ignoring that the decline had not stopped. Our memory is still getting worse. Even a structureless amalgamation of what used to be memories is falling away, as more static begins to rise, slowly replacing the sea of memory with more meaningless noise. Though some acceptance is present, there is still a fear of the unknown and a fear of the loss of what we have left. That same fear is what keeps us and makes us lose it sooner, as the fear is what kept us from experiencing the peace. Fear makes the fluid memories take a corrupted and horrifying form that surrounds and torments us. And we've let that fear take hold again, and it's on that note that the final track of Stage 4 ends. J1 is titled Stage 4 Post-Awareness Confusions. It can't be getting worse. Why is it getting worse? I was happy, I was at peace. I don't want to lose that. I don't want it to get worse. I just want it to stay. What's happening? Why can't I just know what's going on? Why is it so confusing and awful? I just want it to stop. I just want to be peaceful. Why does it have to keep getting worse? Cover art. Glitzholder. The cover art of this stage takes another step in the progression of abstraction. The piece is significantly more abstract and corrupted than the previous ones, and what it resembles isn't entirely unanimous, but to many it resembles the silhouette of a woman or someone else with long hair from behind. Though the colors used, a mix of blues, blacks, and yellows, doesn't resemble any kind of skin or any part of a human. The form itself is corrupted and details are lost, with the features that are present, eyes and maybe a mouth, being messy and unspecific changes in the paint. This further solidifies the idea of the memory losing clarity and meaning. As the paintings become more abstract, so do the memories, and what they represent or used to be becomes harder to know until eventually it's impossible. The features of this person melt together in a swirling mess of colors that is just barely recognizable as a person at this point, sharing a likeness to the memories that have melded together to the point that they are barely recognizable as memories anymore. This painting could be how we see and feel our memories during the stage. Rather than a person, we see a mess of abstract colors in the rough shape of a person, with details hard to make out or notice, though that's just an abstract idea coming from me, someone who has not experienced dementia myself. Stage as a whole. Stage 4 is one of the biggest changes in this album. As awareness disappears and messy confusion takes hold, the music is changed entirely. Where individual songs played before, now there are 20-minute-long tracks of melted and disfigured sound that stretch on in a long form and abstract structure that defines the later stages. Memories are no longer singular, and remembering takes the form of experiencing huge and complexly indescribable mixes of what used to be individual memories. There are no longer memories as much as there is memory. A change has happened, and now we don't remember what happened years ago and what happened weeks ago, we just remember. Though that isn't the only change that is going to happen, and the degradation of memory will continue as time goes on. This stage is the first major turning point in how we experience memory, and in its post-awareness state is the first of its kind. As the memories continue to fall apart, so does the music, and as we progress onwards, we begin to fall apart as well. Time continues, and stage 4 comes to a close. It should be noted, and you've probably already noticed, that this stage and the other post-awareness stages are going to be much more explorative and abstract experiences. My personal thoughts are much more speculative and are even more based on my interpretation, since interpretation is most of what makes these stages make sense beyond their sound. That being said, remember that I am not an expert, and you don't have to agree with me or take my thoughts as fact. Now let us continue. Stage 5. Post-awareness stage 5, confusions and horror. More extreme entanglements, repetition, and rupture can give way to calmer moments. The unfamiliar may sound and feel familiar. Time is often spent only in the moment, leading to isolation. K1. Stage 5, advanced black entanglements. This song is a degradation and deconstruction of the previous stage. The persistent chaos has returned tenfold, though now the sounds and samples that play haphazardly are even more confusing and baseless. Random sounds that aren't even part of a song are mixed in with notes and instruments. Voices and noises clash together and jitter incoherently. Some of the noises are recognizable as instruments or as things such as birds chirping or voices talking, but some are completely incomprehensible or unrecognizable. Static constantly cuts in, cutting off sounds before they've finished playing out, and bombarding the ears with a consistent barrage of endless noise. Then, a small bit of the way into the track, it goes quieter, and one song begins playing. Though it's warped and coated in a thick layer of static, it can still be followed and understood. Then, just when it has settled in, it is suddenly cut out and disappears in an instant back into the sea of static and sound. Chaos taking over once again until soon enough the song is long gone, and it's impossible to remember how it went. This is a consistent theme throughout the track, songs playing for a short period or instruments coming through only to be suddenly muted and tossed aside. Memories of song and moments are now deviations from the norm, anomalies, as the norm has become the chaotic and horror-filled assault on the senses that makes up most of the track. Partially through the track, all of the sounds grow quieter but no song cuts in. Instead, an empty and blank chamber takes hold, only occasionally interrupted by unfamiliar echoing noises, yet always overlaid with constant and inescapable static that distorts and cuts out and back in just like the sounds that are present. This track, aside from a few parts, is notably louder than the previous stage, with a more constant and deafening kaleidoscope of sound that is always present throughout. Some of the echoing and distant sounds in the background sound recognizable or almost familiar, yet after appearing they soon disappear again, as the constant droning ambiance shifts and bends nonsensically. At one point all sounds either from distant echoes and static cut out, then the volume slowly grows as a loud and chaotic vacancy takes hold, continuing on until it fades back and the noises from earlier come back, though more muted and deafened than before. With individual sounds or identities even harder to make out, recognize, or even notice, this pattern of insanity goes on for 20 minutes, with the small reprieves, returning of musical structure or changes being something to wish for or hold on to. Near the end of the track, the sound cuts away again, and only distant and unrecognizable noises are audible, yet this time they seem to be instruments of some kind, though the possibility of them being random and meaningless noises is still always possible, and it's only harder to tell with the level of static and distance that there is. The track is titled Advanced Plaque Entanglements, which is most likely referring to what happens within the brain when it is suffering from Alzheimer's. Neurons within the brain can be damaged or cut off by buildup of entanglements of plaque and dead cells within the brain, which begin to appear as the disease progresses. This plaque can disrupt synapse connections and lead to cell death, which is thought to be one of the main causes of the mental deterioration that the disorder causes. Stop. Please, stop. I can't think. I don't understand what's going on. Please just make it stop. It's so loud. It's so loud. It's so loud. I want it to stop. I want it to stop. Please stop. L1, Stage 5 Advanced Plaque Entanglements. This track continues with more of the noise and chaos of the previous one, though some of the sounds and how they play are reminiscent of the temporary bliss state. But at this point, any of the actual tone or emotion that they carried has been distorted to the point of just being pure static. Actual sound scarcely makes an appearance. This mixes in with the rest of the chaotic sound, and it becomes clear that the sounds and tones have lost all meaning and only clutter up the senses with more disturbed and horrible chaos. This track and the previous track are a representation of a degradation of memory and even less clarity. There's no meaning left. Sounds and memories are barely distinguishable from chaotic noise, if at all, and it's impossible to tell what is memory and what is just nonsensical stimuli. This coincides with the distortion of musical notes and instruments to the point of being unrecognizable, symbolizing that even the fluid mess of memory has begun to degrade and fall apart, with pieces of distant memory becoming unfamiliar and losing any kind of meaning that they once had. As already unfamiliar sounds pierce through the mess of static and thought, the fluid memory of transforming and is being diluted with insanity and pure confusion that brings back the senses of horror and chaos that was in the previous stage, but makes it even more inescapable and noticeable. Not only is there no longer any structure, but the pieces of rubble are beginning to erode into dust, and eventually won't even be pieces of structure at all. And even the idea of memory will become harder to grasp entirely. Occasionally some intact memories will manage to surface for a moment, structures that haven't yet collapsed entirely, though these are scarce and are swallowed or destroyed almost as soon as they're there. The crashing waves of confusion and chaos destroy anything that appears, assimilating the broken and degrading pieces into themselves and only growing more ferocious as time goes on. A non-stop assault on the senses that is entirely deafening. While there is still the ability to remember, what's being remembered is a mess of nonsense that can't even properly convey its meaning or emotion anymore. There is no comfort in memory when the feeling of comfort has fallen apart and no longer exists. There is no peace once the idea of peace is unrecognizable and the memory of peace is unrecognizable, and is just part of the noise that controls and instills terror and confusion in us. L1 is titled Stage 5 Advanced Plaque Entanglements. Please, just stop. Please just make it stop. Why won't it stop? What's happening? What's wrong with me? Why won't it stop? Please, I want it to stop. M1, Stage 5 Synapse Retrogenesis. This track is an immediate departure from the direction that the previous two had. Rather than a growing chaos and noise, now the fog has grown significantly, enveloping and muting any sounds that there are, with occasional static breaking up the continuous blank noise. Any sounds and tones that are heard are either barely noticeable or are so distant that they merely blend in with the ambient white noise that continues unchanging. Any form of song or even noise is almost non-existent amidst the foggy emptiness that fills the mind unrelenting. Once or twice a tone will pierce through, only to be swallowed again, leaving no impression behind in its wake. The most common thing that breaks through, however, is almost always static, which has become a constant throughout the album so far and continues to break into the senses regardless of how cloudy and confused they are. The title of the track is Synapse Retrogenesis, and this directly references what is happening in our brain. Retrogenesis is a term specific to Alzheimer's, which is the concept of brains of patients with Alzheimer's deteriorating and degrading in the reverse order of how they developed as they aged, essentially meaning that over a long process with time, the brain and mind slowly revert to that of a child, and then eventually back to how they were at birth. The addition of the word synapse here implies that the same process is also happening to individual synapses as they decay and neural pathways close down. As this happens, the fogginess that is so prevalent in this track begins to represent something new, where the chaos of previous tracks represented degraded and damaged perceptions of memories. The fog now represents the disappearance of more of them. Synapses were damaged and began their retrogenesis before, and the signals that were sent were mangled and changed to the point of being confused and different. But now they have degraded and deteriorated far further, to the point that the melted signals weaken and grow more faded, with some number no longer working at all. And that number slowly grows as our entire mind follows that same pattern of regression. Without memories and experiences, we become more childlike and lose more and more understanding of the world and our surroundings. The soup of memory drains away more and more of what makes us who we are, and we fade into nothingness, and we are slowly replaced by an empty and undeveloped version of ourselves. What's happening? I don't understand. I don't get it. Why am I sad? I can't remember. What can't I remember? Why can't I think? I'm so confused. N1, Stage 5, Sudden Time Regression into Isolation. This track is instantly a more chaotic and intense one, with louder and more offensive static and broken sound that falls apart again and again in a difficult struggle to stay together. Sound stopping recognizable almost entirely, and almost anything that can be heard is pure noise. Yet some sounds are familiar, and occasionally there will be an instrument or two, but the familiarity has melted away, and now many of the sounds feel cold, unfamiliar, and hostile. Whether or not something has been heard before falls to mystery, and over time it becomes hard to remember even how the previous track in Stage 5 went. Over time the sounds grow quieter, and the static grows louder as everything else slowly falls away. This song is one of a powerful regression, an intense destruction that tears apart what used to be familiar and what used to be there. Structures reduced to dust now blow away with the wind, leaving nothing behind. Pools of fluid drain and dry up, leaving no proof that they were there to begin with. This track represents the continual decline of our mental state as our mind regresses through time to childhood, like the name implies. But I believe that more than that, this represents the destruction and loss of something integral to our being. As memory continues to fade and fall apart, and eventually has almost entirely gone, we start to lose our understanding of, and even awareness of, time. Without memory to prove it, time doesn't exist, and as we lose our memory, we forget even the concept of memory and of time's passage. The only thing that we understand is now, and now is a tormenting existence of chaos and unintelligible noise that we can't grasp or know. Without time and without any escape from our mind, we then regress into our isolation, confused and hurt by the world that we're in, with no idea that there was ever anything other than this moment of terror. As the structures disappear, we forget that there were ever structures to begin with, and as pools dry up, we forget that there was ever any fluid to begin with. This track is titled Time Regression into Isolation because we've regressed past the concept of time and are now isolated in an existence without it. Isolated in moment to moment, not able to realize that there is or has ever been anything else. While sometimes memories are able to peek through to our psyche, they are distant and unrecognizable, and we don't even realize that we're losing them. And with that, Stage 5 comes to an end. What's happening? What's going on? I don't get it. Who is that? They say I can't remember? What can't I remember? Why do they say I can't remember? They're leaving. What's going on? Cover art. And I'm gonna mess this up. Epitransistis mestionskers descending. This piece is another level of abstract and chaotic, and has lost almost all of the structure and potential gleamed ideas that were present in the previous ones. While Stage 4's artwork usually was seen as a similar shape by different people, this one has a wide variety of unrelated interpretations. The previous was like a picture that had been disfigured and warped. This makes it harder to even guess what it could have been before, with melding and messy strokes that clash and swirl all over, creating a confusing and entirely abstract shape. Though there are still some spots that stand out and give ideas and visual concepts, most of it is a blended mess of color and light. I asked some people that I know what they see in the image, and I'm going to tell you some of their answers now. A person dancing, someone riding a bucking horse, underwater structures like coral rocks and shells, someone in a rocky cave offering an umbrella to a spherical creature, and an old lady sitting down, a warrior with a fan standing against a boulder, a mess of faces in a rotten plum, a girl fanning a fire with smoke pluming out everywhere. I personally see someone in a frilly and poofy dress holding a cane. All of these are mostly of the upper portion of the piece, which almost all of the people I've asked describing the bottom structure as a staircase leading to nothing. This part is almost unanimously seen, and the significance of it isn't quite clear, but one idea is that this staircase represents life, and correspondingly the end of life at the end of the stairs. The upper portion of the piece likely isn't supposed to be a real recognizable shape, but it does represent us, or at least our mind and the state of our memory, where our thoughts and memories have lost any shape or meaning to us beyond what we can hopelessly guess at. Trying to find familiarity in something new, unfamiliar, and impossible to understand. Stage as a whole. This stage follows where Stage 4 left off, showing the continued decline and degradation of our confused mind as we helplessly thrash against the waves, trying to understand some sort of meaning that we've lost along with our memory. The decline grows faster and more uncontrollable as time passes, and we go from drowning in a pool of thought and memory to eventually sitting in an almost empty hole, our minds still filled with static as we lose even the disfigured remains of music and our cherished memories. This stage is undoubtedly one of the loudest and most chaotic, and throughout most of it is a yearning for quiet and peace that is palpable as a continued assault on our senses and mind drives us to desperation. The stage is one of fear, horror, and confusion, and the small moments of calm or peace we latch onto desperately, only for them to be pulled away from us again. While that's how it is for most of it, near the end a new form of horror takes hold, one of terrible isolation and loss as the chaos subsides and noises grow quieter, as we lose ourselves along with our memory, and we are left alone, broken, and lost as Stage 5 ends. Stage 6. Post-awareness Stage 6 is without a description. 01. Stage 6, a confusion so thick you forget forgetting. As Stage 6 begins, there is an instant difference from most of Stage 5. Most of the chaos and noise has disappeared, replaced with ambient distant growls and groans of unknown source that echo on, with the only consistent or really present sound being the static that pops and crackles along. The distant echoes ebb and flow, sometimes cutting in randomly, and sometimes slowly building up, with the noise present growing slowly quieter over time. Yet the static continues at the same volume constantly, the symbol of distortion and chaos still present once both have gone. None of the distant sounds are recognizable, and none even remotely resemble music. Though very rarely, a single note or sound can be heard before it echoes and fades away, unable to last or stay. More distant, deep sounds, distinguishable from each other but still unknowable, continue to drown, fading slowly away before more takes their place. There's a sense of great distance from any sound, and great emptiness that allows noise to bounce around so infinitely. This track is a fog, a vast cloudy emptiness. The confusion still plagues the mind as any attempt to make sense of the scenario fails. This is the aftermath of the last track of Stage 5, the aftermath of the loss of time, and the true isolation that has come of it. As the title of the track says, we are in a confusion so thick that we forget forgetting. The concept of memory and time is lost to us entirely. We forget that we forgot. We forget that we ever remembered, and we are ever lost in this thick fog of confusion that eats up our mind. Any intact or persistent memories are so distant and clouded that they lose any meaning or point, just more distant noise echoing against a vast emptiness. The static continues on, though, unrelenting and uncaring of the damage that has been done. Everything we experience at this point is a confusing, lost, and isolated idea of what's real. We live in nothing but the moment, as outside stimuli rattles through our personless self, echoing against the emptiness that fills us. Neural pathways fall apart, and we are reduced to a confused, unknowing, childlike version of ourselves with nothing but broken emotions and scarce outside feeling to exist alongside. When we do manage to dig up some semblance of a memory, we don't even understand what it is or what it means. It's just more meaningless noise that will fade away as soon as it appears. Where am I? What's happening? That person says I forgot. What did I forget? What does forget mean? I don't understand. I don't get it. Is it my fault? Where did they go? Where am I? P1, Stage 6, A Brutal Bliss Beyond This Empty Defeat. This track is similar to the previous one, but with crackling sounds coming closer than fading back, getting loud and taking priority for a moment before falling back into the echoing sea of nothing. The same long droning sounds continue on in the distance, but the cracking sounds have replaced the static to some degree, making it louder but more confusing and damaged as well, prattling on and on, swirling around the head in a random and confused pattern that is unpredictable and strange, and yet still the echoing of distant noise is always audible. Beating against the walls of cold and empty space, semblances of song or notes can't be heard at this point, covered by a staticky crackles of abstract sound. This track is a change in mindset, a change in thought. It's similar to the temporary bliss state. While confusion is still present, there is no longer the same sense of isolation and sadness, with emotions of bliss and peace taking over our nearly empty head, peace in near silence, peace in the small pieces of sound that we can hear echoing, which is why the track is titled A Brutal Bliss Beyond This Empty Defeat. Because this bliss isn't one of victory, it's one that's caused by us forgetting that we suffered defeat, forgetting that we've lost against time and lost our memory. The bliss is brutal because it's, again, one of ignorance. We feel a bliss and a peace because we don't know what we've lost, and we don't know that this, like the precious bliss state, is still entirely temporary and can't last forever. But we don't even understand the meaning of temporary or forever, only that right now there is peace in the confusion and bliss in the emptiness of the fog. We're ignorant to the existence of anything else, and we're ignorant to our own despair. Emotions that once swirled around and exploded like firecrackers go distant and change like the static, leaving only the faint feeling of peace with us. Without any way of knowing how bad it is, we believe it's good, and we believe that things are okay. But despite beliefs, deterioration continues as time marches forward, and even though nothing we can grab onto can save us from it, we've stopped trying to grab on at all. We can't try to stop what we don't understand and don't know. We can't hold on if we don't know we will fall. We can't swim if we don't know we are drowning. Happy, so happy, wonderful and beautiful and amazing. Everything is wonderful. I'm so happy. Q1, Stage 6 Long Decline is over. This track begins in a similar way to the previous ones, yet quieter again, with a more prominent and consistent foggy static that covers up almost any of the other echoing noises. Occasionally another will take over, but as they echo into nothing, the now more faded sound of static continues onwards. For a moment partway through the track, a distant echo of a brass instrument playing can be heard. This moves on for quite a few moments, but then fades away into obscurity. though again not too long after it can be heard again. Several instruments can, such as a piano, but after playing they all go silent after enough time, and the only consistent sound is the foggy crackling noise that bends and flows through the chasm of our mind. Again and again, instruments ring out just for a short time, playing a long-lost memory that isn't whole anymore. Yet it still only feels like noise. Even though it's clearly music, we don't understand that it is. We don't realize what we're hearing and feeling. Those lost and single instruments are the remnants of memories that manage to stay, and there's finally enough quiet to hear them, but at this point we're too far gone. We don't recognize them or realize what they mean. It's too late for them to mean anything anymore. This track is the loss of bliss, the loss of emotion entirely. We've lost our emotions and feeling, we've lost any semblance of ourself that remained, and forgotten memories that resurface are just noise in an unfeeling mind. It's impossible to understand or even take note of them, because we've lost all the emotions that we could have reacted with, all of the feeling that they could have conveyed. As the track continues on, it gets quieter, with noises becoming fewer and farther between, long periods of nothing but foggy static filling great distances of space before finally a sound, a sight, something happens that echoes through emptiness. But again, it does not last and fades to nothing as the track only grows slowly quieter. The vast nothingness only grows larger and more empty as time goes on. There is no sense of familiarity nor happiness, nor sadness or anger or feeling. Nothing but the noise of reality. The external stimuli that we hear, see, and feel that rocks and bounces through our head, causing no response beyond simple acknowledgement that it happens. We see what's in front of us, but the images don't tell us anything. We can hear sounds, but they don't represent anything. We feel the world around us, but it's simply touch, no point or reason behind it. No thoughts for it to provoke or trigger. We react in only the most basic ways, and we understand nothing beyond that something has happened, and forget that it happened soon after anyway. Our mind has lost almost everything, and we don't even know it, and couldn't even understand if we were told it. Time marches forward, and we stagnantly live on. As the title says, as the track ends, the long decline is over, and we have reached true emptiness, true loss, true isolation. Burning memories blaze, but it doesn't matter anymore. They aren't anything more than noise that we just notice. R1, Stage 6, Place in the World fades away. This track, the final one, begins with almost pure silence. No static, no echoing ambient noise, just soft silence, the faintest of foggy white noise, just barely audible. This is suddenly interrupted by a loud and intense echoing crash, but after it slowly echoes and fades away, the silence returns, continuing on until eventually another sound rings out in the far distance. Every single time this happens, though, there is an immediate return to the quiet, the ominous and inescapable quiet that there is. It eventually overtakes and outlasts every single noise. Sounds that do play vary, but are always too distant to even hope to make out anymore. And they always slowly fade in, filling the senses and then disappearing into pure emptiness. There are conflicting senses of peace, horror, and melancholy present throughout, as droning, distant sounds fall to quiet again and again, ringing in futility against the silence. This is the state where even outside stimuli fades away, static and noise fall apart, and any response at all disappears. This is the most complete emptiness that there is, with the quiet emptiness slowly consuming what small bits and pieces of memory, thought, and self are still left, leading us to become nothing but a husk of a person, unresponsive and unsalvageable. Noise gives way to nothingness, feeling gives way to nothingness, even isolation gives way to nothingness. About halfway through the track, several sounds join together, bringing in a loud harmony that fills the head completely with its sound, pushing back silence in a sprawling array of what could be considered music that grows louder and louder, chords of organs droning on together, taking over the silence and replacing it entirely. These organs ring onwards continuously, growing and changing and morphing as time passes, and they continue. What these organs represent isn't clear. Maybe a form of peace in nothing, or a culmination of all the remnants of ourself that still exist fighting not to disappear completely, trying somehow to not fade away. It's a mystery. Suddenly, the organs cut out, and a needle is dropped on a record. Static comes back soon after it does. Sounds play, and then, slowly, a choir of music fades in. Not abstract music, an actual song. Slowly, slightly faded and distant, but clear and distinguishable as itself as it plays through. It continues onwards, singing, flowing notes come together in a beautiful ringing melody and harmony. This likely represents terminal lucidity, a phenomenon where right before someone with a mental disorder dies, they have a short period of time where they are able to function completely normally again, talking and laughing and interacting. It's also possibly a nod to the idea that usually the last thing a dementia patient remembers is their favorite song. When the song ends, the static continues for a moment before it disappears and we enter the final true silence, which lasts for a minute. Some theorize that this represents the minute of silence held at funerals out of respect, but I think it actually is representative of death itself. All of stage 6 is a slow progression of quiet and silence, and this is the final complete, pure silence. It's when our place in the world fades away, like the title of the track, and as we reach the end of the staircase and the end of the deterioration, the album finally concludes. I remember. I remember. It's wonderful. Life is wonderful. I remember everything. How did I get here? I don't know, but I remember everything. What have I been doing all this time? Cover art. Necrotomigod. This piece reverts away from the continual abstraction of before, now returning to a more grounded and recognizable form, and the form it takes is very clear. It's a wooden board with 4 pieces of blue tape attached to it. While that might not seem very meaningful, if you have ever made art, then you will recognize that this isn't just any board. It's a board meant to be placed on an easel that gives a solid surface to place a painting on. The tape is used to hold the paper in place. But this isn't the front of the board. What we're seeing is the back of the board. The art piece is on the other side. While people are able to look and see the painting of who we were, we can't see anything but a blank slate. This cover art is actually a lack of art, or a lack of the ability to see the art. Our mind has deteriorated to the point that we can't even see ourselves, and have lost ourselves. We can't see the other side, can't get through. There's no going back to when we could see the art, pick apart its meaning, and understand who we are and our mind, because our mind has gone, faded away into nothingness. And even this won't last. Eventually the art will be taken down, and the board will cease to exist. Stage as a whole. This stage is one of finality and surrender, and all of it is after we have already lost the idea of memory. As the stage progresses, we begin to lose more as the songs lose volume and sound. We lose time, feeling, emotion, and eventually even our senses, slowly becoming more hollow and empty until eventually we're nothing but a shell of our former self. And all the while, there's nothing we can do to stop it. In fact, we don't even realize that there's something to stop. As our mind degrades more and more and neural pathways degrade and plaque builds, we lose any and all resistance that we used to have, it being slowly replaced with complacency and simplicity as pieces of us fall away. It gets quieter and quieter and quieter. More sounds, memory, emotion, feeling, all drift away into the void. And for a small moment we return to normal. We can remember everything and think and feel and smile and laugh. But then the final silence comes, and after losing everything else, we finally lose our life. Time marches onward without us, and as we fall into nothingness, stage 6 and the album end. Burning memories burn no more, and we are everywhere at the end of time. I told you it's dark. Dementia is one of the scariest concepts in existence, and it's real. People have to go through things like that. Someone I knew has gone through that, and it's an awful feeling. It hurts to realize that someone has forgotten who you are after spending so much time with them. My heart goes out to everyone who has lost someone they love to dementia or Alzheimer's, and I hope you're doing okay. If you feel up for it, I fully recommend giving the entire 6.5-hour album a listen. Just carve out some time for it. Consider buying the album on Bandcamp to support the creator, because in the end, it will have been worth it, and you'll come out a different person.
My final thoughts. Everywhere at the End of Time is not horror. It isn't a thriller. It isn't an adventure. It's an experience, a real and inescapable experience. Far scarier than any Friday the 13th or Halloween movie. It's terrifying and full of despair. And in reality, I would describe it as a horrible experience listening to it. But it's the kind of bad time that pulls you right in and makes you feel infatuated with it. The experience won't leave you feeling happy, but after it you'll be a more mature person. You'll understand just a little bit more about dementia, and you'll be better able to empathize and help other people. And you will savor and cherish every moment you have just a little bit more, because you'll understand how great of a privilege it is to remember and how temporary that memory is. Savor the temporary time you have with people. Don't waste it being selfish or childish. Don't waste it on petty arguments. Just enjoy it and help others to enjoy it too. If you want to like this video or subscribe, then I would like that. You can hear me rant like an idiot in more videos or experience some of the other content I'm currently making. But ultimately you don't have to. I won't tell you to subscribe or smash like. That isn't what you should take away from this video. It isn't the lesson I wanted to convey. What I wanted to say is, enjoy life. Do what makes you and others around you happy. And don't be dumb. Anyway, I am Muffin, signing off. May the ballroom remain eternal. Sieste finie.